The barbecue betrayal. It was a sweltering July afternoon in Maplewood Grove, a tidy suburban enclave in Northern Virginia, when I realized someone had tried to harm my son. Not by accident, not through negligence, but with cold, calculated intent. My boy Ethan is 10 years old, autistic, and the light of my life. He was at a neighborhood barbecue, organized by our homeowners association, when he doubled over in pain, retching into the grass, his small hands clutching his stomach like something was tearing him apart from the inside. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he'd eaten something off someone else's plate, or his allergies had flared up. But the truth was far uglier. The woman responsible was Cynthia Hargrove, the HOA president, a figure who ruled our community with an iron grip disguised in floral dresses and practiced smiles. She had deliberately handed Ethan a plate of raw chicken, knowing full well his medical vulnerabilities. She looked at me as he ate, her lips curling into a smirk, and said, "Maybe it's time he learns to eat like everyone else." I'd brought Ethan Zud, meticulously prepared, and given her a detailed list of his dietary restrictions. I'd watched him like a hawk, but Cynthia had found her moment. She saw my son's differences as a flaw to exploit, his fragility as a target. What she didn't know was that I, Daniel Harper, wasn't just a grieving widower and a protective father. I was a state-licensed health inspector with the authority to turn her perfect little world upside down. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 58, a widower, and Ethan's only parent. My wife, Laura, passed from breast cancer 7 years ago, leaving a void that still aches like a bruise you can't stop pressing. We'd been married 25 years, and she was the one who knew how to navigate Ethan's world, his silences, his routines, his bursts of joy. When she died, Ethan was barely 3, too young to understand why mommy wasn't coming home, but old enough to feel the weight of her absence. He'd sit by the window, humming softly, waiting for her car that never came. I was left to piece together our lives, learning to parent a child with autism alone while carrying my grief. Ethan doesn't speak much. He communicates in other ways, through the way he arranges his model trains in precise, color-coded rows, or the way he flaps his hands when he's excited, like he's trying to catch the air itself. He's brilliant, though most people don't see it. He can name every constellation in the night sky and explain how stars are born in a way that would stun an astronomer. But he's also fragile. His immune system is compromised, a side effect of a genetic condition that makes infections like foodborne bacteria a serious threat. Crowds overwhelm him, and changes in routine can unravel him. But his heart is a universe of its own, vast, warm, and unguarded. We moved to Maplewood Grove 2 years ago, hoping for a fresh start. Our old neighborhood in Richmond was filled with too many memories of Laura, and too many pitying glances from neighbors who didn't know what to say. Maplewood seemed ideal, a quiet cul-de-sac, a modest ranch-style house with a big backyard, and a community that prided itself on its manicured lawns and friendly block parties. On the surface, it was perfect. But surfaces, I've learned, can hide rot. I'm not the kind of man who stands out. I wear faded jeans, old work boots, and a flannel shirt most days. People assume I'm a retired mechanic or maybe a former cop. I don't correct them. My job as a health inspector for Virginia's Department of Health isn't something I advertise. It's not just checking restaurant kitchens for expired milk. I'm part of an investigative unit, tasked with enforcing state regulations, shutting down unsafe operations, and, when necessary, coordinating with law enforcement. I carry a badge, but I keep it in a drawer at home. I never thought I'd need it in my neighborhood. When we moved in, I joined the HOA to avoid trouble. Cynthia Hargrove, the president, insisted. She greeted us with a basket of homemade scones and a plush rabbit embroidered with the Maplewood Grove logo for Ethan. I thought it was a kind gesture, though something in her eyes, a flicker of appraisal, made me uneasy. Within weeks, her true nature emerged. She sent emails about the shade of my mailbox, too dark, the height of my hedges, a quarter-inch too tall, and once, a pointed note about Ethan's vocalizations during his evening walks, suggesting they might disrupt the community's tranquility. I gritted my teeth and complied, not wanting to make waves. I had enough to handle Ethan's therapies, his doctor's appointments, and keep his world steady. Cynthia was relentless. She was 62, with a polished exterior that screamed control. Her lawn was flawless, her flower beds arranged like a magazine spread, and her colonial-style home gleamed with fresh paint. Every morning, she walked her corgi, Biscuit, in a matching sweater, her auburn hair swept into a flawless chignon. She wore tailored blouses in soft corals and lavenders, always paired with a pearl necklace. But beneath the polish was something hard, like a blade wrapped in silk. She didn't just want order, she demanded perfection, and anyone who didn't fit her vision like Ethan was a problem to be fixed. I tried to keep the peace. I waved when I saw her, helped her unload mulch from her SUV once, and even smiled through her backhanded comments about Ethan's special needs. But nothing satisfied her. She'd stop me at the community mailbox to suggest more suitable hobbies for Ethan, ones that kept him indoors. Once, she asked if I'd considered moving to a less visible part of the neighborhood, somewhere better suited for a child like him. Her smile never wavered, but her words cut deep. I started avoiding her, skipping HOA meetings, adjusting Ethan's walks to miss her morning patrols. I thought I could outlast her pettiness. I was wrong. The barbecue was billed as the HOA's summer sizzle, a chance for Maplewood Grove to come together over burgers, hot dogs, and lemonade. I almost didn't go. Ethan struggles with crowds, and I knew Cynthia would be there, holding court in her element. But I wanted him to have a moment of normalcy, to hear laughter that wasn't from a screen, to feel part of something. I packed his cooler with safe food, roasted turkey slices, steamed broccoli, and a pouch of mango puree, all labeled and sealed. I checked every item twice, ensuring it was cooked thoroughly and free of allergens. Ethan wore his blue noise-canceling headphones and clutched his stuffed owl, Hoot, for comfort. I chose a spot for us at the edge of the community park, under a large oak tree, away from the main crowd, but close enough to feel included. For the first 45 minutes, everything was fine. Ethan sat on a blanket, tracing patterns in the grass and humming softly. I stayed close, chatting with a neighbor, Tom Reynolds, about his new sprinkler system. I kept one eye on Ethan, watching for any signs of distress. He was calm, even content. Then I made a mistake. I stepped away to grab a bottle of water from the cooler, just 20 feet away. I was gone for 30 seconds, maybe less. When I turned back, my heart stopped. Ethan was chewing something from a paper plate, and Cynthia stood over him, arms crossed, her face lit with a smug satisfaction. "What did you give him?" I demanded, dropping the water bottle and rushing to his side. Cynthia's smile didn't falter. "Oh, Daniel, relax. It's just a bit of chicken. A little raw, maybe, but it's practically ceviche. You coddle him too much. Let him try something new." My vision tunneled. Raw chicken. To a child whose immune system couldn't handle a common cold, let alone Salmonella or Campylobacter. I'd emailed Cynthia 3 weeks earlier, titled Ethan's Dietary Restrictions for HOA Events, listing his vulnerabilities and begging that no one offer him food. She'd replied, "Noted. We'll ensure Ethan's needs are respected." I snatched the plate from Ethan's hands and threw it into a nearby trash can, my hands shaking with rage. "You knew," I said, my voice low but trembling. "You had the list. You knew his immune system couldn't handle this." She waved a dismissive hand. "You're being dramatic. If you didn't hover over him constantly, maybe he'd learn to blend in. Normal kids eat what's served." Before I could respond, Ethan gagged. His face paled, and he curled into himself, clutching his stomach. Hoot fell to the grass. His humming stopped, replaced by shallow, panicked breaths. I scooped him up, ignoring Cynthia's protests, and ran to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't care who saw it. My son was in danger, and every second mattered. At the hospital, the ER team moved fast. They hooked Ethan to N4, administered anti-nausea meds, and drew blood. The doctor confirmed my worst fears, signs of foodborne illness, likely bacterial, though they couldn't pinpoint the strain yet. "You did the right thing bringing him in quickly," she said. But her words didn't soothe the fire in my chest. As I sat by Ethan's bed, watching his small chest rise and fall, I replayed every moment of that barbecue. Cynthia's smile. Her words. The way she'd watched him eat. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate act, a cruel jab at a child she saw as less than. I wasn't helpless, though. Before leaving the park, I'd grabbed the paper plate from the trash and sealed it in a plastic bag I kept in my car for Ethan's sensory meltdowns. I'd also noticed Margaret Ellis, a quiet retiree who lived across the street, filming the event on her tablet. She'd caught everything: Cynthia handing Ethan the plate, her lingering smirk, the whole exchange. And she wasn't the only witness. Paul Martinez, a former caterer who lived down the block, had pulled me aside as I carried Ethan to the car. "That chicken wasn't cooked," he said. "Straight from the cooler, not even seasoned. I saw her give it to him. You need to do something." Oh, I would. Not through HOA complaints or neighborhood gossip, where Cynthia could twist the narrative. I was going state level. She'd served raw meat to a medically fragile child in a public setting, ignoring documented warnings. And I had the training, the badge, and the authority to make her pay. By midnight, I'd filed an incident report with the Virginia Department of Health. By morning, I'd contacted a lab technician to test the chicken sample. By noon, I'd submitted Margaret's video and Paul's written statement. I activated every protocol I knew, not out of vengeance, but for accountability. Ethan was discharged the next day, weak but stable, clutching Hoot as we drove home. He whispered, "Safe now," his voice barely audible. I nodded, but my work wasn't done. Cynthia had crossed a line, and I was no longer just Daniel Harper, the quiet dad on Cedar Lane. I was Inspector Harper, and I was building a case. Monday morning, I dressed for battle. Navy polo with the state seal, khakis, badge clipped to my belt, clipboard in hand. I knocked on the HOA office door at 9 a.m. Sharp. Cynthia answered, her coral blouse pristine, her pearls gleaming. Her smile froze when she saw my badge. "Daniel," she said, her voice tight. "I wasn't expecting you." "Official inspection," I replied, stepping inside. "We've had a report of food safety violations at the HOA barbecue. I'm here to collect your statement." Her composure cracked, just for a second. She sat, crossing her arms. "This is ridiculous. It was a misunderstanding. Ethan must have grabbed the plate himself." "Is that your final statement?" I asked, pen poised over my clipboard. She faltered. "Well, I might have offered him a bite, but I didn't know about any medical issues." I opened my folder. On June 10th, I sent an email titled "Ethan's Dietary Restrictions for HOA Events." It outlined his immune condition and requested no one serve him food. You replied, "Noted. We'll ensure Ethan's needs are respected." I slid the printed email across the table. Her face flushed. "I get hundreds of emails. I can't read them all." "You read this one," I said. "And I have Paul Martinez's testimony stating you handed Ethan raw chicken directly." Margaret Ellis provided video footage showing the same. Cynthia's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no retort. I stood. "Based on the evidence, I'm submitting a report to the State Health Board. If Ethan's tests confirm bacterial exposure and the lab matches it to the sample, we'll pursue charges for reckless endangerment of a minor." "You can't be serious," she snapped. "I'm not just serious, Mrs. Hargrove. I'm authorized." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The weight of the evidence, the calm precision of my words, was enough. That afternoon, I delivered the report to the county health department. The lab confirmed salmonella in the chicken sample. Ethan's blood work showed early infection, though antibiotics were working. The video, emails, and witness statements triggered a formal investigation. By Wednesday, state investigators descended on the HOA office. They interviewed board members, seized event records, and questioned Cynthia. Word spread through Maplewood Grove like wildfire. Neighbors whispered at mailboxes, posted on the community app, and called for an emergency HOA meeting. Cynthia tried to spin the narrative, claiming she was misunderstood and only trying to include Ethan. But the evidence was ironclad, and the community's mood shifted from shock to outrage. A child had been endangered. Excuses didn't cut it. The fallout was swift. By Friday, the HOA board suspended Cynthia's presidency. A week later, she faced a state health board hearing. She arrived in a tailored gray suit, her lawyer arguing it was an unfortunate oversight. But the facts were relentless: my report, the video, the email, Ethan's medical records. Paul testified that Cynthia's actions seemed deliberate. Margaret's footage played in silence, showing her handing Ethan the plate with a look of triumph. The board deliberated for an hour before delivering their verdict. Cynthia was guilty of willful negligence. She was fined $12,000, banned from overseeing food-related events in Virginia, and stripped of her HOA role. But the consequences didn't stop there. The district attorney reviewed the case and charged her with reckless endangerment of a vulnerable person, a felony. 3 days later, officers arrested her at her home. I watched from my porch as they led her to an unmarked car, biscuit yapping from the window. I didn't cheer. I didn't need to. Justice was moving. At her trial, Cynthia plea bargained to avoid prison. She received 150 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and a court-ordered public apology. On a crisp September morning, she stood in the community park, reading from a prepared statement to 60 neighbors. "I deeply regret my actions," she said, her voice breaking. "I failed to respect Ethan's needs and endangered his health. I'm sorry." She glanced at Ethan, who sat beside me, holding Hoot and watching a squirrel scamper up a tree. He wasn't angry. He was just Ethan, present and whole. That was enough. Something remarkable happened in the weeks that followed. Maplewood Grove transformed. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to brought casseroles and offered to sit with Ethan. Tom Reynolds built a sensory swing in our backyard. Paul Martinez designed a safe food sign for Ethan's picnic table. Margaret invited us to a low-key coffee morning with 2 other families. No noise, no pressure. The HOA elected a new president, a young mother who prioritized inclusivity. They rewrote event guidelines, mandating food safety training and allergy awareness. Ethan's world grew safer, bandiger. He still arranged his trains and needed his headphones, but now neighbors waved when he flapped his hands. They learned his rhythms, his joys. One evening, as we sat on our porch, Ethan leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. "Happy here," he said, his voice soft but clear. I smiled. "Me too, buddy." Cynthia moved away 6 months later, and her house was sold to a young couple with a toddler. Her reign was over, but what rose in its place was something she could never have created, a community rooted in respect, not control. I thought of Laura often in those quiet moments. She'd have been proud not of Cynthia's fall, but of Ethan's rise, of the way he'd changed our corner of the world without saying a word. Looking back, I realized silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just survival. Ethan taught me to speak when it matters, and to fight when the stakes are high. That barbecue could have broken us, but instead, it rebuilt us. Maplewood Grove isn't perfect, but it's home not just for Ethan and me, but for everyone who chose to listen, to care, to stand up. If you've read this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced injustice in your community? Maybe a bully like Cynthia who hid behind rules or charm. How did you respond? Do you think justice always requires a fight, or can it come quietly, through persistence and truth? Share your stories in the comments below. Your voice might inspire someone else to rise and say, "Enough."